That concludes our public participation and takes us to our items that were considered in executive session. The first item are our selected employment items. Do I have a motion? Selected employment items. Ms. Hutchison.
I move that we approve the selected employment items as shown in Exhibit A.
Do we have a second? Mr. Cates, second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Are there other selected employment items? Ms. Hammond.
I move that we conditionally sustain the suspension and recommendation of termination of a professional employee, subject to the employee's rights to a hearing regarding the suspension and recommendation of termination consistent with state law.
Do we have a second? Ms. Hutchison seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. That brings us to the second item, which is item B, receipt of legal advice regarding a proposed contract for design services for a new elementary school shown at Exhibit B. Do I have a motion?
Mr.
Cates.
Chairman, I hereby move that the board approve the execution of a contract for design services for a new elementary school to be located at Amix Ferry Road with Quackenbush Architects. Quackenbush was the highest ranked proposer for the solicitation, and the administration has recommended a proposed contract which has been negotiated with that firm for the services needed. The proposed contract has been solicited and negotiated in accordance with the applicable board policy and district's procurement code. The motion authorizes the superintendent to confirm the acceptability of all contract terms with the district's council and/or return the matter to the agenda for a special called meeting for further approval and move forward with design of the school.
Do we have a second to that motion? Ms. Hutchison seconds. Any discussion?
I have an amendment.
Ms. Hammond?
I would like to amend the motion to delay until we have directed the superintendent to explore the possibility to build the much-needed elementary school on the already purchased site at Garrick's Pond, because it is a much safer site and it is where the extended growth is located.
Have a motion. Will you give Ms. Stowers a copy of that motion? No, you don't have to do it now. You do have it written.
Okay.
All right, we have a second to that motion. Mr. Lovelace seconds. And this motion is to amend.
Right, it was to do this first before we move on.
Now for
Building it.
discussion on the amendment which has been proposed, I'll go back to Ms. Hammond. Ms. Hammond.
And I would like to explain, I certainly support a school being built, and we needed it 9 years ago when we bought this. And we had reasons that I don't really understand why, but I think it's important before we move forward. I was explained by the experts, if we are going to change the site, then that's important to the architect, it's important to the people that build it. So this is my last-ditch effort to see if I have any listeners on the board that might just consider that we just direct the superintendent to come back to us at the next meeting and explain why we can't build there, because it is where the growth is, and my biggest thing is safety. And I can assure you the day, if you go and you stand out where that is, it's a true safety issue. It doesn't matter. We need the school, but I totally agree with the public buy-in that that's not the safest place to put it. So it's just my attempt. I support Mr. Quackenbush building it. I want to make that clear. I don't want anybody sitting here thinking I'm not for that. I'm happy with him. I'm happy with construction. But I know that if we do consider this, it has to be done before we go any further with the plans. So I hope I have some board members that listen really to why this at least should be answered. And it may be that we cannot, and then I can move forward. But I need to know that we can't and why, because we do own the land. We bought it, and it's sitting there. And I've had experts that aren't board members but are people that are in the community that are builders that say you know, it should be revisited, and that's important to me before I move forward.
Any other discussion? Mr. Lovelace?
Mr. Gant, I think there's going to be ongoing cost, transportation cost especially.
Microphone, please.
Is it not on?
Get closer.
Just pull it closer.
Okay. Anyway, I think there's going to be ongoing cost, transportation cost and the like, that we're going to be moving kids from one part of the district fully 7 miles to another part of the district that are going to go on for a long time, if not forever. And I know there's been a big movement afoot with our county council person and our county council to make the Amix Ferry corridor, they've rezoned the roads so that you can't build the large subdivisions that you can have in other portions of the county. And rightfully so, I mean, if that's what the people want. But I think that's going to end up being a large cost that we're going to have to endure for a long time. And I don't see the need in it when we could put the school, you know, where it was originally proposed to go.
Thank you. Any other discussion, comments? Mr. White?
Yeah, I'd like to add, you know, I don't know the exact date, Ms. Hammond, but when we voted originally to buy this land, we had extensive conversations, and all those questions were answered, why that site's not. Well, I was there. You can shake your head no, but I explained them to you. Steve Hefner explained them to you. We had other people explain them, and you sort of muttered on the way out the door. You disagreed, and then you came out and told the public that we didn't need to build there, et cetera, et cetera. There are lots of reasons. We've explained them. I don't think we need to take this meeting because this is political to churn something. So I can tell you personally, I was there and I explained them to you. I know that there were several other board members that were there as well. Mr. Lovelace was not there and Nikki was not there. So the rest of this panel was there. I don't see the need to occupy this time with a political stance. But number two, the reality is the decision was made based on people that are experts, that the people that were advising us at the time, Steve Hefner, the administrative staff, they live and breathe these students where they live, where the demands are, and it's not something we just pitch off to the public to make. And the reason the site was chosen, Amix Ferry Road, because that is a better site. There's reasons you can't build at the other site.
What are they, Mr. White?
We've explained them in executive session, and I'm not going to do it here for you
I've
to make
never
a
heard it.
grandstand, okay? If anybody on this panel disagrees with me that those reasons were explained thoroughly, then please chime in. They don't need the stage. You had the stage last summer. This is a repeat, Jan. And but I see no reason to do anything but move forward with what we're intended to do.
Any other discussion? And we're discussing the amendment Ms. Hammond raised. So
Can the public find out why?
we're not going to be entertaining comments from the public, and you know that, Ms. Murphy. So I'd like for you to contain yourself where you are.
Well,
So
what-
we're
there-
having a discussion.
There's some items in executive session you don't bring out of executive session,
This was not
and part of that property was interfered with the contracts, okay? That's executive session conversation if it leads to litigation. But we explained this ad nauseum behind closed doors last time, Ms. Hammond.
You just named personal people to me, which I'm not going to repeat, but I don't know how they could stop it. So I've never been explained.
All right,
Never.
we're discussing now the amendment. Is there any other discussion regarding the amendment that Ms. Hammond's raised and has had a second? Any other discussion or comments that we need to do there? All right, Ms. Hutchison, yes.
I was just going to say, Ms. Hammond, I believe you were on the board when all of that happened. I was looking at, you're on the board.
Yeah, I voted for that property. You're correct.
No, I have meeting December 13, 2010, where you did not.
No, I'm talking about on the property.
No, I'm talking about you did not approve to proceed with the site adaptation for the new elementary school back in 2010.
Okay, but I'm talking about the site right now.
But you opposed the implementation of an elementary school there when we were working on doing that. Your vote is there. You opposed it.
So I guess what
Mr.
I'm,
White,
I
want
think
Ms.
you're off
I
the
want
subject of what, mine's
Ms.
a
Hammond,
simple
Ms.
motion.
Hammond. Ms.
Vote it
Hutchinson
up or
has the
down?
floor. Let's allow Ms. Hutchinson to finish her comment. She's making a statement from the official record of the board, I believe.
right,
And then
right,
you
this
can
one.
respond if you need to.
So what I was saying is, you were on the board, just as a reminder, I know a lot goes on, but I'm just supporting the fact that you were on the board at the time that some of the dilemmas that created the problems, and because it's a legal matter, we are not really able to talk about it in open session. But you were part of the board at that point when these problems arose, and without, it was not the school district's fault, but it was something that impacted us, and so you were part of that board. So I'm just reminding you, I mean, it's not anything that has been kept secret from you. We're just bound, as Mr. White said, because of executive session, because it was an executive session and because it's a legal matter. I'm just trying to jog your memory.
Okay. Mr. Lovelace.
I've been asked this by the public, and the whole time that I ran for election, I don't know the answer, and so for me, it's not, I understand executive session, but could we not have one of our fine attorneys craft an answer to this?
I tell you what we can do, we can make sure our next meeting that you get the full story on why we're in the situation that we are in with this particular property. And then then parts of that, if it can be done publicly,
Yes, sir.
we'll certainly do it. I'll make sure you know the things that we've heard in executive session over the last 2-3 years, and I think we've heard it more than once. So there's a lot of people around this table that have heard it.
Okay, well,
And I'll make sure that you do. And we'll proceed from there. And
Okay.
Ms. Gardner also. We all probably need a refresher. Ms. Hutchison.
Well, and I just want to say, I agree, it's very frustrating. I'm very frustrated that I can't just blurt out and say, this is what the problem is. It's very frustrating. So I think that, I like Mr. Gantz's suggestion that we can possibly find out what can be said, because we are very transparent whenever we can be, but sometimes there's reasons when legally we can't. So I understand some of the frustration because I share it as well.
Any other discussion?
I'd like to answer Ms. Hutchinson.
Okay. Now, we're discussing, I want to make sure everybody understands, we're discussing
motion,
your
my
amendment to
amendment
the
to the
original motion.
Right. But my point is, we were, and I do remember, and she brought this up, I do remember us discussing it, but here's my point that the public does need answering. So when you get Mr. Lovelace's point, if you can, whatever you are legally able to say, my understanding is we still need to explain to the public why we signed and paid whatever, I think $600,000, and then we paid some more things to get all the different, the design and the making sure the land was able to grow, you could build on. But we spent a lot of money on that. So we must have legally thought we bought it clear and could have bought, could build on it, because it was where the growth was. It was only 1 point something miles from Lake Murray Elementary that for 9 years has been overcrowded. So my point is, you need to be able to explain then why we bought something that we have some legal problem with that we cannot discuss with the public because it makes us look pretty bad, okay? That's my point. So why would we move forward?
Land is an inventory. Because we bought land doesn't mean we can't resell it. We may resell that
Okay.
land
Then
someday.
talk to
Well,
the public
Point
about
of,
it.
may I raise a point of order? Ms. Hammond has had the opportunity to speak in support of her amendment, and we've had discussion that appears now to be drifting from that amendment. And if there's no more discussion pertaining to the amendment, I don't want to call for the question, but I'd like for us to at least stick to the germaneness of the topic.
I agree.
Absolutely,
I'll call
and
for the
I
question.
thank you for that. I do want to say, I hadn't entered into this at all, but I do want to say that Ms. Hutchinson brings up a very valid point, that years ago, in the process of looking at a site, it is a very viable school site, and it may well someday be. Nobody's ever said this is not a good school site. Mr. White makes a good point. You need some inventory. Now, we've had a recommendation that where this new school is proposed is the best place to put it. So I don't want us to lose sight of that. This is a valid site. And at the time that we could have moved forward on that, maybe didn't have quite the implications and the restrictions that we do today. The board voted to make some moves forward, and you did not support that. So I think that's the conflict that Mrs. Hutchinson trying to point out. That's just an obvious thing. So we're back to the amendment. The amendment is what Mrs.
Do you want me to read it back?
Hammond has proposed.
I need to read it. Have you got it, Ms. Stiles? Or- okay.
Will you
Should
read,
I?
will
Should
you
I
read
read
just the motion?
To direct the superintendent, just to delay the Amix Ferry site until we've given the direction to the superintendent to explore the possibility of being able to build the needed elementary school on the already purchased site at Derrick's Pond, because it is safer and it is where the extended growth is.
And she will give you that before y'all leave tonight. Make sure you got that down. All right, so at this point, all those in favor of Ms. Hammond's motion to amend the original motion that Mr. Cates made, please raise your hand in support of that motion. All right, that's two people, Mr. Lovelace, Ms. Hammond. All those not in favor of Ms. Hammond's motion, please raise your hand. And that's 5 people, remaining 5 board members. So that brings us back to our original motion made by Mr. Cates. Is there any further discussion on the original motion? Mr.
No,
White.
I would just like to clarify for the public that this motion was modified at Mr. Lovelace's request. He wanted to read the full contract, not in red line format, and so what we've made this motion that gives him the flexibility to come back to legal counsel and the superintendent if he finds something that he thinks is significant. But we had a lengthy conversation about the terms of the contract. Mr. Lovelace had a number of questions that were all answered, but in deference to him, we've modified this to allow him to read the clean contract in the next few days, and if something is significant, then we would likely come back next week, a special called meeting to address it. But we're doing this for deference from Mr. Lovelace and his questions and his concerns.
The one thing I wanted to say about that, after having left the room and I thought about it, and I thought it was horribly unfair to Dr. Melton. So I apologize profusely to fellow board members for wasting your time on that, but I don't think it's fair for Dr. Melton to have to make a decision on something like that. So anyway, that's the reason I didn't bring up a motion that I had planned to. So I apologize.
No apology necessary. All right, so we're back to our original motion. Any other discussion on that? The original motion is stated. Let's restate.
Read it again?
Yeah, I'm going to read it again really quickly.
I hereby move that the board approve the execution of a contract for design services for a new elementary school to be located at Amix Ferry Road with Quackenbush Architects. Quackenbush was the highest ranked proposer for the solicitation, and the administration has recommended a proposed contract which has been negotiated with the firm for the services needed. This proposed contract has been solicited and negotiated in accord with the applicable board policy and district's procurement code. The motion authorizes the superintendent to confirm the acceptability of all contract terms with the district's council and to return the matter to the agenda for a special called meeting for further approval if necessary and move forward with the design of the school.
Ms. Hutchison.
I was just going to say that, Mr. Lovelace, I appreciate what you're saying about the superintendent, but I think it's written in there that the superintendent will certainly be working with, excuse me, with council, and if she has questions about moving forward, excuse me, there's plenty of opportunities for that. So I just wanted to reassure you that we're not putting the burden on the superintendent, but we're just trying to allow you the space and the time to review it without it being in the red line version.
Okay. Seeing no other hands up, all those in favor of the motion just read by Mr. Cates regarding the design services, please raise your hand. Mr. Towers, you got that? All those opposed? And the motion passes 5-2. That takes us to item 3C. Do I have a motion? Mr. White.
I hereby move that the board approve the execution of a contract for construction manager at risk services for a new elementary school to be located on Amex Ferry Road with Contract Construction, Inc. Contract Construction was the highest ranked proposer for the solicitation, and the administration has recommended a proposed contract which has been negotiated with that firm for the services needed. These services have been procured as a result of a competitive solicitation process in accord with the district's procurement code. We are advised that having the construction manager at risk work in concert with our selected design professional will benefit both the district in reducing the cost of the project and improving the outcome of the school. This motion is to authorize the superintendent to confirm the acceptability of all contract terms with the district's council and either execute the contract and move forward with the development and construction of the new elementary school, or return the matter to the agenda for a special called meeting for further approval.
Do we have a second to Mr. White's motion? Mr. Cates seconds. And I will go back to Mr. White. You having a discussion, Mr. White?
Yes, I'd like to add, and I think, and I agree with Mr. Levis, I agree with Ms. Hutchison that I think we have very competent counsel that has indicated, working knowledge of these contracts, and to the extent you have concerns about something that, Christina can consult with him and decide if there's something that needs a special call meeting or not. On the other hand, if you don't find anything significant, you don't even have to come up and recommend a special call meeting. So there's an out for you as well. The one thing I would suggest is, like we discussed, that you do it the next 3 days, and you can alert the superintendent if you do think there's something significant, and that way we can have a special call board meeting next week and keep this on track and keep the timeline in place.
Yes, I'll review it and very quickly, as soon as I receive it.
Any other discussion regarding the motion? Ms. Hammond.
I want to say I have confidence in contract construction, but I am still a little miffed at why we couldn't have, we had all that discussion back there trying to get this thing fixed where everybody was, well, with Mr. Lovelace's questions, they were his, since he's the construction person, and I'm glad everybody respected his questions. But I think the fact that we just went through all that and not willing to just let it be brought up the next time, I think the amount of time, I just want to say that publicly, I think we should have, I don't know, honored the fact that everybody might wanted to look at the contract a little bit longer. And so that, I'm just saying that. I'm not going to give you my motion again, because I was going to try that for my same construction companies to change the site, but I'm not going there. But I just wanted to say that, Mr. Gant. Thank you.
Mr. Gant, can I add another comment?
Yes, sir. Mr. White.
And Ms. Hammond, just again for the public edification, I think, Mr. Levis asked a number of very salient questions. He obviously had spent a lot of time in the contract. Mr. Montgomery offered very clear and concise answers and responses that were, to me, were very, very satisfactory. So through that process, I felt like Mr. Levis had vetted it to a large degree, and I did not hear anything that was significant material there. But in deference to him, we want to let him read a clean contract. So we didn't just come, I mean, all else being said, we should have just come out here and voted, but because he's new, Mr. Gannett asked him next time, please ask for the clean contract up front, and we can do this in an orderly fashion. But because he's a new board member, we're extending this consideration to him. Otherwise, I was prepared to vote.
And I, again, apologize profusely to the fellow board members for not understanding the process. And, that was not my intention, so I apologize.
Any other comments before we vote? I had to admit to you, I lost track there a little bit, but we have not voted. We've got to vote.
You ready? It's the
Mr. Case will
contract.
let you know if we have. I'm
I know
sure.
that, and I appreciate that, too. All right, all those in favor of Mr. White's motion, moving forward with under Exhibit C, which is a contract for construction management risk services, please raise your hand. That's 5. Ms. Stowers, you got that? All those opposed, please raise your hand. So motion passes 5-2. That brings us to item D, which is receipt of legal advice regarding the issuance and sale of general obligation bonds shown in Exhibit D. Do I have a motion? Mr. Cates.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution in Exhibit D authorizing the issuance of not exceeding $30 million of general debt obligation bonds of the school district.
Do we have a second? Ms. Hutchison seconds. And we have any discussion? Mr. Cates, you have anything to add there?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Hammond?
I think Ms. Heisman's still here.
She is.
This is given the okay, if we need it, to use the complete amount of the 8% money. Am I correct about that?
No, it's almost that much.
Is it almost,
I believe Mr. Richardson could
Oh,
easily
okay.
answer that, and I believe the answer is no to that.
well, it said not to exceed.
You
30
said all
million.
of the 8%?
Yeah,
No.
and what's the amount of our 8% money?
31 million.
Excuse me, we have approximately $30 million available to us
Yeah, that's what
in
I
our,
thought.
on our 8%.
So, I think you told me in your time, we've not used it all, but we have, if you go back, I think Mr. White said we built Oak Point with the 30%, we did do the 8% money for that. I don't have a problem with building the school with that, if we have to do it. I do feel very much like the board could use the suggestion of a financial workshop. I think that was the word she used. And I think that it would be smart to have that before we move forward of using or voting to use all the 8% money. Because I worry about other schools needing, and you can address that to the public, but you gave us, how much do you keep there if we had the maintenance for schools?
Nope, the $30 million I told you we have available is over and above what we use annually, approximately $10 million
10.
annually for the maintaining of our buildings.
So we would
For
have that.
clarification, Mr. Richardson, that's also 8% money.
That is also 8% money.
That was my question, and I believe you
That-
shared
that-
with us before, that's about, when we issued those bonds, it's not to exceed $10 million, but that's an annual maintenance of older schools, of needs that we have for other items.
That's correct.
That's one.
Mr. Cates?
I just wanted to make sure we're clear on that point. According to the resolution, the total amount available to the district at 8% is $41,135,648. The board in the past and supported each year, as we look at our capital improvement plan, has set aside 10 million of that as kind of an annual recurring. So we pay that back at the end of basically the next year's paying this year.
On an annual basis, we pay that off.
So in addition to that 10 million, there's an additional $31,417,648 available. And of that, we are issuing bonds that will not exceed $30 million.
Correct.
So this time next year, we will still have, will it be this plus or minus? In the next fiscal year, we will have an additional $10 million available for capital projects that we have outlined on the three-year, I think it was, capital plan that we approve each year.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Correct.
Right, and I wanted to thank Ms. Heiser for being here tonight,
Yes,
and
so right.
we've been with her on many other occasions, and also a financial advisor. This is a resolution to move forward. It does not obligate, it does not set the millage at this point, but that's a decision to be made at a later date. But it does specifically address the school at Amy's Ferry Road. So thank you, Ms. Heiser, for that, and we'll look forward to working. Mr. White?
No, I wanted to also add to the clarification. The meeting with the financial advisor is step two. We pass a resolution as we get closer to actually utilizing the money. Then we'll decide where to set the payback terms, and that's where the financial advisor can help, and that will decide the millage. The nice thing about it is what we've discussed and what we've done in the past when we use 8% money for a school like this, you pay it back quickly. And 5 years was something we've looked at. We haven't made a decision, but that seemed to be a number that would work. And every year you pay part of it back, you open up more 8% money. But in the meantime, we have fund balance in case of emergencies. But just for clarity and for the public, we have built a school with 8% money before when it was needed, and it could not wait on a referendum. And had we waited on a referendum, it would have been 5 or 6 years from the time we voted to build 8% money. The referendum didn't come in 2 years. It came in 5 or 6 years. So this school doesn't need to wait on a referendum. It needs to be built today.
Thank you, Mr. White.
I had one question.
One question?
One question. So, by borrowing this amount, for sure we'll need a millage increase. You just don't know what that is tonight before we vote.
That's correct, unless, I'm not trying to be funny, unless somebody will loan it to us and not charge us any
And not
interest.
charge
Well, the
it any
payback
interest.
period is going to define the millage, too.
But you have no idea right now what that would be. Okay, that's all.
And if you remember back in our early bond, 2008 bond, we had some opportunities to borrow money through Build America bonds at 0% interest. There are
They
probably
might
other
do that
pieces
again,
of that.
Mr. Gant. Did you see that in the presentation?
What's that?
Seriously, at the Charleston presentation, the lady from Washington, they may put that program back in, the bonds.
Well, let's stay tuned then. That'd
Stay
be great.
tuned, that's what
That
she
would be
said.
great. And that was a real great thing for us. All right, so we have the motion. We've had our discussion. I'd like to ask now for the persons in favor of the receipt of legal advice regarding the issuance and sale of general obligation bonds to raise your hand in affirmation. And those opposed, please raise your hand. And that motion passes 5-2. We need no action on item E. And that will take us to our amended agenda discussion item number 21, which is a proposed 2019-2020 calendar shown in Exhibit M. And I will turn it over to our Director of Communications, Ms. Goggins. Thank you, Ms. Goggins.